Hepatitis A is a picornavirus, so a lot of what we're going to cover we already covered in the picornavirus overview video, so we'll hit the ground running. Let's set our scene here at the open range zoo. When we hear the word hepatitis, it sounds a lot like hepatitis, so we'll use hippos to illustrate everything we want to remember about the virus. Like we've already mentioned in the overview video, as a picornavirus, hepatitis A is an RNA virus, hence the yellow warm colours. More specifically, it's a positive sense RNA virus, and we have it set in a daytime scene for positive sense. Here we have a hippo drawn in the background, and on his ankle there is a tag reading A for hepatitis A, or as we like to say, hippotitis A. We even have a baby hippo way in the back as its pico counterpart. Hepatitis, as you may have guessed, affects the hepatic system, the liver. So we have a brown spot drawn over the hippos that are shaped like the liver to help us remember that. A huge thing about hepatitis A is that it's acid stable, just like most of the other picornaviruses. This contributes to its transmission since it is transmitted fecal orally. This makes sense, the stomach has a ton of acid that can help break pathogens down, but hepatitis A is acid stable so it can easily go through all of that acid. We have the hippo hanging out on a rock in the middle of a bubbling and blistering acid pool. They're stable on this rock, protected from the acid, for acid stable. Next, we're going to draw in the statue of David over here because, like most other picornaviruses, Hep A is a naked virus. Finally, we're drawing these monstrous hippo poops to remind you that the fecal oral route is the main route of transmission, either via person to person contact, like during sex or caring for someone with hepatitis A, or via consumption of contaminated food or water. People who inject drugs are also at an increased risk of being infected with hepatitis A. Let's spend some more time going into transmission, since this is an important point for hepatitis A. Hepatitis A can be shed in feces and then contaminate water supplies. In higher income countries, a lot of effort goes into purifying drinking water to eliminate Hep A. To illustrate this, we've drawn a giant purifying machine that is purifying all of that gross acid and hippo poop. In order to inactivate hepatitis A, we must chlorinate, bleach, use UV radiation, or heat water to 85 degrees Celsius for 1 minute. All of these processes are going on within the purifying machine here, and to help us remember, we will write it down on the side next to it. Here, we see this guy pumping out pure hepatitis A free water from the purifying machine. However, in lower income countries where there is a lack of water purification, this is a common route of transmission for Hep A. In the US and other higher income countries, though the drinking water goes through extensive purification, we can still have transmission through water sources indirectly. It can be transmitted in shellfish that were caught from contaminated water sources, especially uncooked shellfish, as well as from contaminated private wells used to collect drinking water. Let's draw in a USA shellfish snack bar at the zoo. USA signifies that this is a common source of hepatitis A in the US. To reinforce that we're talking about hepatitis A, we will give the shellfish snack bar an A rating from the Department of Health, which are used by some jurisdictions in the US as well as elsewhere internationally. Although, look at the shellfish saleswoman pulling shellfish out of the hippo exhibit here with a big fishing net. She's pulling them right out of this gross poop contaminated pond, so these are very contaminated shellfish, a very common culprit for Hep A associated food poisoning in the US. Additionally, we've given her a large backpacking backpack. This is because hepatitis A is common amongst travelers who are traveling to endemic areas, especially in the southern hemisphere. Okay, let's move on to clinical symptoms. Hepatitis A is often clinically silent or subclinical and can be anicteric, meaning without jaundice. But it can also cause acute viral hepatitis, fever, hepatomegaly, and jaundice. Let's talk about that because that's what will be tested. In front of the snack bar, there are tables everywhere where everyone is hanging out, enjoying their day at the hippo acid pool. We can see one guy dressed in a bright yellow sweater and pants eating some of the contaminated shellfish and drinking some non-purified water. He's barfing everywhere. This will help us remember some of the symptoms of Hep A infection as well as the modes of transmission. His yellow jumpsuit will help us remember that hepatitis A can cause jaundice, especially in adults. Notice the child is also vomiting, however, he's not wearing a yellow jumpsuit. This is because in young children, acute viral hepatitis is less likely to cause jaundice, what we call anicteric hepatitis. Finally, this last guy illustrates another clinical feature of acute hepatitis A infection. Often, smokers who develop hepatitis A will also develop an aversion to smoking tobacco products. So let's add this guy extinguishing his cigarette, looking disgusted and sick of smoking. Okay, so let's talk about treatment and symptom duration, both of which will be illustrated by this sign on the shellfish stand. It says 2 months only, limit one per customer, and no carrying out of the snack bar. The 2 months only is the duration of the illness, typically less than 2 months. Limit one per customer means that hepatitis A is often self limiting. And no carrying out signifies that there is no carrier or chronic state. Before we wrap up, let's talk about prevention. Hepatitis A is one of the viruses that we are lucky enough to have a vaccine for. To help you remember that, we drew a tranquilizer gun shaped like a syringe on the hip of the shellfish zookeeper. We can remember that it's inactivated because this is a tranquilizer gun, and what do tranquilizer guns do? They inactivate animals. It's good to remember to give the vaccine to patients who are considered high risk. This includes those who live in endemic areas, patients with chronic liver disease, people experiencing homelessness, men who have sex with men, and people who inject drugs. Hep A is relatively simple compared to the other Hep B and Hep C viruses, but it still has a lot of information. Don't let it be the neglected stepchild of the hepatitises. Hepatitis C's? Whatever. Review this and the Picornaviridae overview video and you'll be golden. A nice, jaundicey golden. Until next time.